Welcome to Unleashed at Work and Home, the show dedicated to helping veterinarians, vet techs, dog trainers, shelter and rescue workers, pet sitters, and all the other animal crazy pet professionals manage their stress and find more joy. I'm your host, Colleen Pilar, and I'm thrilled you're here with us today. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on your favorite app so that you won't miss a single episode. This episode is brought to you by our free community, the Circle of Resilient and Thriving Pet Professionals. If you like the ideas shared here, then you're invited to continue the conversation with other lifelong learners in the community. You can find out more at colleenpilar.com. It's the perfect place for you to learn cool stuff, feel good, and take action to create the life you love. Come join us. Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is Heddie Wittlin-Leger. Thanks so much for joining me today, Heddie.
You're welcome. It's such a pleasure to be here, Colleen. Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to have you. I have pet professionals of so many different types come on this show, and you are in a category that's a smaller niche, the professional humane educator. And I think that that's such a valuable role that I'm super excited that you're here to talk to me today about how it happened that you became a humane educator. Like, that's an important piece. So one of my favorite places to start is, of course, with what you thought when you were little. What you thought life was going to be for you, and then let's figure out how you got from that belief to where it turned out. So, what was it? What were your dreams when you were young? What did you think?
That's a wonderful question. I actually don't remember what I was thinking when I was young. I've always been more of a doer.
Mm-hmm.
So, the thoughts usually come after I do. I kind of live with the cart before the horse most of the time. And so I have some defining moments that can answer that question, though, such as I can remember when I was 6, I was watching this beautiful pigeon flying, and he miscalculated and got hit by a vehicle. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, his beautiful flight was abruptly stopped, and he fell to the ground. And I was, it just went to my core. And I ran over when the traffic was safe. I ran over, picked up the pigeon and carried him home, put him in a box and gave him a proper burial. And as I look back on that experience, I can actually define some of my thoughts and feelings. But I think as a visual in your mind, that can encapsulate where I started and where I'm going in this journey. And the next one was when I found a puppy in a dumpster. I'm like, okay, I heard whimpering. I'm supposed to be in school, but the school dumpster had a puppy in it. And I'm like, no, I'll have to suffer the consequences. I climbed into the dumpster, pulled the puppy out, took him home. And of course, we had a no animals rule in our house, no pets. But that was my first at all. Okay. No pets.
And you're the person bringing home dead pigeons and dumpster puppies.
And puppies, yes. And that's about as rebellious as I get. When it comes to animals, there's a little rebellious streak in me for their welfare. But I actually negotiated with my parents, and as long as he stayed outside, he was allowed to stay. So that worked out. It worked out well. That was my first humane education experience, though, because I actually helped my dad learn how to like dogs. He had been bitten as a child, so he had a lifelong fear. And when I left home to go to college, that dog became his constant companion. And we called him Dumpster Duke. And when he died, my dad bawled like a baby. And he lived 18 years.
Oh, wow.
18 years. That's a really good long time.
Yeah.
So, I could go on lots of stories, but I'll stick with the animal piece here. But I've always carried with me the thought that our perception of the problem is more than what we're looking at. It's more our ability to look through that perception of the problem to the possibilities. So with my dad, that was my first true life experience of, yes, it was a problem and it was a family dilemma, but I was pretty firm on wanting the dog to stay, and we worked it out. So that's where we found the possibility in what could have been an issue. And I've carried that through my whole life. That's pretty much my thumbprint. And I just think about that on a regular basis. And that pretty much has led me to where I'm at today. So I don't know where to go with that one as far as humane educator and dog training and um, all the pieces that have fit together. So um, it led me to always having a dog in my life. It also led me to realizing that at the time it wasn't an extremely lucrative career, and still it's a struggle for most people. So I was more always educating people, and I started a pet sitting business. And in my pet sitting business, I could bore you to tears with lots of stories. But the crux of that whole affair is that every one of my clients would say, "You should be a trainer. You should be a trainer." And I'm like, "Well, what's a trainer?" Because I would teach the dogs, don't run out the door, or don't jump on me, or don't fight over your food, and so I was educating the dog. And then the human wanted to know, how did you do that? And
Mhm.
so then I taught them. And I think that's all dog training is.
Mhm.
It's teaching. So I, at the time, looked for ways to become more educated. And I picked one of the most well liked and popular and famous trainers in our city and took one of my Rottweilers to her. And here comes another defining moment
Mhm.
because I walked in the door with my baby, right, my fur baby,
Mhm.
and she immediately says to me, "Here, you need to put this on her." And I'm like, "What is that?" It was a pinch collar. And I was like, "Have you put that on yourself?" I mean, I didn't know anything at the time. It looked horrible. And I thought, I'm not putting on this thing on my dog. She said, "Well, if you want to be in my class and you want to learn and train, you have to put this on your dog." And I said, "Okay, no, thank you." And I walked out the door and I started to self educate. And that led me to a plethora of different communications with people. I was interested in animal assisted therapy, but it didn't exist at the time. I actually wrote universities asking them, "Do you have a program?" I read about animal interventions. They
Mhm.
didn't have a program, but they said, "No, but if you want to donate, we can try to start one." So I just kind of took it on my own and learned as I went and found people that wanted to learn how to do it. And we formed a local little group because there weren't any protocols at the time. And then Delta Pet Partners came along and I got
Mhm.
involved with them. And then I became an instructor, evaluator, educator. And that was the phase of time where I went to Humane University and decided that I wanted to do more than just train. I wanted to teach people how to live with their pet and understand them and bridge the gap between the species. So that's what I did with the Humane University um, designation for certified humane education specialist. And at the time, that's all there was. The field has developed tremendously, thank goodness.
Mhm.
So I'm feet on the ground in the trenches, along with Jennifer Shyrock, who I love dearly, and Family Paws, and I worked with her and use that program to educate folks with their pets. And just little by little, always looking outside the box and coloring outside the lines, so to speak. because it felt as though we still were not reaching the piece where both species were communicating back and forth. And of course, you're a trainer, so you've seen the field evolve.
Yeah.
And little by little, it's evolving to that point. It's not quite there yet, but instead of 25 positive, 75% negative, now it's more 75% positive, 25% people still hanging on to coercion and aversive. And but science is now proving that the reward based, the force free, and all of those pieces that we learn each other's language. And that's one of my bylines is animals don't know English and we don't know their body language. So it's a flow of communication that needs a lot of tweaking sometimes. So I'm just thinking there's really no one size fits all.
Yeah.
And if we try to categorize and put things in boxes and color and stay in the lines, then things never evolve and grow. And I'm just all about evolving and growing and helping as many people and as many animals as possible. So I just continue to evolve. My step from pet partners, therapy work, was a good decade or more, much more. I'm not going to date myself. And that actually evolved into crisis work. And then that evolved into working in prisons.
So tell me about that.
That is the piece I love the most. I love it all, but I love the most because you take the shelter animal, you place them with an appropriate offender that meets the criteria of being able to be in the program, and the criteria are very high. And then you teach the offender how to teach the dog. And of course, there's a lot of details that go behind the scenes on that, where you have to teach the staff, you have to have the support of the warden, you have to have the director over them being supportive. And so I ended up having to train all of the staff, all of the wardens, the director, and the person above him. I can't remember who it was, but to me, that was the most rewarding and also the most devastating, because to work with some folks that can't read, often don't know how to write, and encourage them and build them up and help them learn, they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they did do it for the sake of the dog. And they're still doing it. Missouri Puppies for Parole is still blossoming in leaps and bounds. So that piece in itself showed me to never give up hope, to just, even the most, now we couldn't, there are certain people that could never qualify if they were dangerous, but there were people that could work their way into the program, which again is a piece of not giving up hope, because there was one person that was in isolation all the time for behavior. He wanted to be in the program so much. He improved his behavior for an entire year,
Mm-hmm.
qualified, and then end up being the best handler in the state. I mean, and that's where you think that you never know.
Yeah.
Change is always possible. And I translate that over into the animals, in that even the worst of behaviors in animals, if we can figure out what works for them, figure out who they are, and what is going to tweak that little piece inside their soul that makes them want to be a part of your world and a part of your life. There's the key, but that's the hard part.
Right, because it's different for each one. I mean, it's every living being has their own background, history, baggage, beliefs, comfort level, interests, all of the things. The prison program work is very, very interesting to me. I did an episode with Kim Immel a while back, and I had I had the opportunity to go and see her program. And it was a profound experience for me because I had, before going, some pretty mixed emotions about how I felt about that, having the dogs there. And it
Mhm.
was a good, well-designed program that supported everyone, and that they really did find that the people who participated in it had tremendous growth for themselves, for their hope, for their opportunities, for their ability to interact with each other, other incarcerated people, but also with the staff. And there was all sorts of ripples there. So that
Mhm.
education isn't just about humane education is not just how do we treat animals, it's how are we going to be as humans? How do I want to exist in this world? Um, you had said earlier that all of this sort of brought you to the work you're doing today. And I realize we don't really have a great encapsulated version. So let's just pretend we just met you at a party and we go, so, hi, Heddie, what do you do? What is that? What do you say?
Well, currently, I went back to school. Talking about putting the cart before the horse, all of these programs I developed and only touched on a couple um, are programs that usually are developed by people with certain degrees. So I went back to school for social work, and I noticed that actually working with animals and people, you are doing social work.
Mhm.
You have to use a little bit of psychology. You are teaching. It's the whole ball of wax.
It is.
And I decided to specialize in veterinary social work because through the course of my studies, I learned in our suicide segment that veterinarians were the third highest occupation and animal welfare. And I won't even touch upon all of the shelters I work with because our program was statewide. So we worked with shelters, 20 different shelters. So I have an overview and a plethora of a knowledge base on shelter operations and the stresses and the burnout, compassion fatigue, and that's where the humane education
Yeah.
piece comes in on a really high level. The prison program was the pyramid of pointing that out, and that each individual has a singular thumbprint. Thus, each individual needs to be treated differently, but
Mhm.
still with the same respect and the same amount of compassion so that they can reach their level of wherever they can reach in their journey. So I um I actually was disrespected by many dog trainers because they felt I was diminishing the uh, professionalism of the field by teaching offenders how to train dogs. In reality, it's the absolute opposite. We teach them how to be better human beings. We teach them compassion. We teach them that everyone's in a cage. Everyone's in a prison of their mind, but it's what we do with that and how we turn it around to benefit ourselves and others that makes the ripple effect to make life better for everybody. And I mean, I guess it's a little serendipitous to say it changes the world, but it does change someone's world. So I consider the prison programs like a world within a world with that ripple effect. And I can honestly say a high majority, I can't give you a percentage of people in the program, men and women, I worked both facilities, men and women facilities, would say, if I had known then what I know now, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And, it made me cry. It still makes me cry
Yeah.
to think,
That's what stuck out to me from the program that I went to. There was a man there
mhm,
who said that the program was making him a better father to his children, and that if his father had known what he had learned through this program, he thinks it's unlikely he ever would have been a person who wound up in prison. And so he's
Right.
hoping that as he implements what he has learned when he gets out, and also in his relationship with his children while he's still in,
Mhm.
that he can make really positive ripples for them. And I'm such a big believer in ripple effects. I mean, that we don't ever know where the end of influence, where does it stop? Where does it go from here? And it matters. So yeah, it matters.
It does. It matters tremendously. So that humane education piece started when I was 10 with my dad. Of course, now it's a degree.
Mm-hmm.
When I actually went through Humane University, it was a certification.
Mm-hmm.
So I still am doing humane education in all different levels. But I felt as though I'd reached a point in my life that the actual paper on the wall is important to some people. And I felt as though there's more that I can do, but to do that more, I need that piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
So
When will
that's
you
why I
get
went.
that piece of paper? When will you have your degree in veterinary social work?
I It should be 2026.
Awesome.
So I'm pretty much there. I'll be working on my master's next year. And I'm really excited because I'm doing my internship with the premier organization for veterinary social work, which is the International Association of Veterinary Social Workers, which is
Did not
another.
even know there was enough of them to have an international association. I do know, I mean, I absolutely know there's the field of veterinary social workers, but I did not know there was an international association.
It's growing. It is growing in leaps and bounds. And that's where I want to be in this next leg of my journey. I just feel as though everything the universe has brought to me, I have accepted. And then all I've done is look to say, what is it that I can do? How can I serve? What can I do to help? And then these situations arise that the door is open and I walk through it. Like when I applied for the prison work, there was a room full of trainers. After the meeting, one came back. It was me. Um, and I'm like, there is no challenge that's too big as long as you try, and you may have to tweak it. You know, you might have to tweak it a little bit, but there's always a way to figure something out. And so I carry that through to everything, even my clients now, which I only go by referrals now, um, because the prison ruined me, basically, in a good way. I saw that it can be achieved. And when I work with a person 8, 10 weeks and there is no progress, then I know immediately there's no buy-in on their part. And if they're blaming the animal, then I know immediately there's a communication barrier. So it schooled me in a non-traditional way as to recognize there will always be some folks that, um, no matter how hard you want to help them, they aren't willing to put in what they need to put in order to succeed. And so I quit beating myself up over it. I think a lot of us do that. We don't fail people, they fail themselves.
What helps you to have the distinction for yourself to know like what's yours to carry and what's yours to hand back and say, okay, that's your emotional stuff and this is mine? Because that is something that so many pet professionals struggle with. What are some of the things that help you?
It's a huge struggle. I have very good friends that are veterinarians and they try as hard as they can to help people see. I'll take one instance, a dog that is extremely overweight that is having health issues. And the vet is trying so hard to help them learn how to help their dog lose weight. And it's not working. So then they call me in to try to help the folks understand on a different level. They're more, I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not a doctor. I'm them. I, it's a different relationship. And I come in and oftentimes say the same thing. I'm like, your dog needs your help. And if they have too much of a blaming perspective in life, or they're not willing to accept the fact that they need to take ownership of their actions and their words, that's a client that I generally will only give one session or one series of sessions. And then I honestly will say, I really hate to waste your money. This is your time. This is your money. I'm coming to help you. And I just feel as though it might be better if you give this some thought and then call me back another time when you feel like you really have the desire to succeed on this. It's worked 100% of the time, too. Surprisingly, because there are people that will call me back 6 months later and their attitude and everything about them is totally different. So that's pretty much the way I do it. And it has worked for me. I can't say it would work for everyone. And I think that's the pitfall of what we do as trainers is we come up with a really good method or we have success with something with certain dogs. And then we as a whole say, this is the only way to do it. And there is no one only way. So that toolbox that we use is just immeasurable. It's another ripple, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does require such creativity. I have a dog right now who has some eating challenges. And all of the answers I have given previous clients feel kind of trite to me at the moment as I am working through these things with her. And I don't feel like I didn't care about my clients who shared these things. I was very much trying to help them. But the experience of like, well, this will work. I believed some of the things that I shared, like, I think this will work. Try this and let me know how it goes. And
Mhm.
sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And when it worked, yay. But when it didn't, I think in my head, I thought, well, you probably didn't really actually do the recommended plan. But now I know that I have actually done the recommended plan of any number of recommended plans, and I still have a dog with some eating issues. Okay, she's different. I'm different. We got to figure this one out. And that is the case for every single situation, every human interaction, and every animal interaction is that this is a case study of one, like let's look at who we have here and what we want to do
Mhm.
here.
Who is this individual?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and what are the things affecting, you know, the the behavior? Because behavior is affected by so many different things. And it can get very, very complicated. And what are the things that we can control? Because some of them we can't control. Some of the parts are far out of our control, but some things we can tweak with our bit, and it will make a big, big difference. And then we get those ripples.
Mhm. And I was just going to say, and when you're working with the animals, they can't tell us. And there can be things from their historical background that are really difficult to dredge out.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Nope, nope. You are the guest. Everything you say is more important. That is the rule here. So I'm curious, what is something you know to be true about yourself or the world now after this career of humane education that you maybe didn't know so clearly when you were younger?
Oh, that's really a hard question.
I
I
love hard
hadn't,
questions. You're allowed to
I,
skip them.
that's really a hard question. Say it again, please.
What's something you know to be true about yourself or the world after this, lifetime of experience that you've had that you didn't know when you were younger?
I tend to be a positive person. I
Mhm.
think it's just my core of who I am. I have learned the world can be a very harsh place, and people, when you least expect it, can be very judgmental. And what I have learned that I did not know before is how not to absorb that, to remain true to myself and my core of that caring, that compassion, that positive motivation
Mhm.
that makes you want to wake up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing that has really struck me recently. And it took me a long time to learn that. So I must be a really stubborn person and didn't know it. But that would be it. In the sight of all things, the world is harsh. It can be judgmental, but just always remain positive
Yeah.
in whatever capacity that's possible.
And that ties in beautifully with the words you shared. I always ask my guests to share some words, and the words that resonated with you were hold fast to hope. And just as you were speaking there, there's such hope in that of who do you want to be and how do you want to be, and being the compassionate person that you are, and really looking forward from that lens. So tell me about hold fast to hope. When did those words come into your life, and what do they mean to you?
I'm laughing because they've always been there,
They've always
but
been.
they've always been there, but I'm living it now
Mm.
in the flesh because our veterinarian called me one day and said, someone pulled in this dog from the street. She's blind and deaf. She knows nothing. I don't know what to do with her. And I'm like, well, the shelter was going to euthanize her. And the vet had this intuition that they shouldn't. So she pulled her in, kept her. I went in, evaluated the dog, took her from the vet's office to the park. She was fine around people, fine around dogs, beautiful with everything. Took her in the store. She was perfect in the store, met some ducks and geese. I couldn't find any reason to euthanize the dog. So we started working with her. They kept her housed. I had too many. So they housed her. I worked with her. And we tried to place her for a whole year. They ended up naming her Hope. They held on to hope.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And she's just this most beautiful spirit and soul and happy, always a smile on her face. And no one wanted her. So one of my dogs, who was 14, had had a seizure, passed away. Hope came to our home.
Mm-hmm.
And now I hold on to hope all the time. I'm sorry. It makes me really teary eyed to
Yeah.
think that there's so many millions of dogs that never have a chance.
Yeah.
And Hope and I needed to lose 40 pounds. She's a cattle dog mix.
Mm.
Her energy level is off the roof, but you cannot let her run, right? She's a hazard to herself, basically.
Mm-hmm.
She can't see and hear. So I learned how to do canicross,
Mm.
and I walked every day. And I've never earned a medal in my life. We now have a wall full of medals for hiking canicross and meeting mileage goals. And I lost the 30 pounds holding on to hope, right?
That's
So
awesome.
it's actually a pun on words. And I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you brought it up because it's so true. And there's many days where blind and deaf dogs do have their emotional challenges. I can't say it's a walk in the park and clouds in the
Yeah.
sky and lollipops and roses, but um, the pros far outweigh the cons. And when she has a bad day, if something sets her off like a tick, a little tick, and she wears a Seresto collar, I spray her, but she'll still get a tick on her. She is so sensitive to the environment that that little tick will set her off where she's trying to run away from herself.
Oh, wow.
And I can't convince her there's no danger. So I just have to put her in her safe space and wait and sit with her and hold on to her and let her know I got the tick and she's fine and we're fine and it's all good. And that's my life story right now, holding on to hope.
Holding on to hope.
Yeah, in more ways than one.
Yeah. And it ties in so beautifully with the work that you'll be doing as a veterinary social worker, because hope is such a powerful and important emotion for people. It really drives so much behavior. When we have hope, we can do things that we never dreamed we could do. And when we don't have hope, we can't do things that should be simple.
Yes.
Yeah, that feels like maybe that's the place we should end this. This feels like a good spot right there. So if people wanted to learn more about you and the work you do, how could they do that?
Just email me. I'm rebranding. I'm in the process of evolution. So my email is accurate, the website, not so much. And I'm trying to create a haven for uh, people going through duress that are in the animal field
Mm-hmm.
to get away. And I do have the ability to do that with um, a nice, quiet, rural place in the country with a little therapy horse, and people could just de-stress a little
Yeah.
bit. But I don't have the website up and I'm not ready for that yet. But this is a perfect venue to visit with you. And um, actually, you've helped me think some things too, also with your questions. So,
Well, good. I'm so glad. I'm so
yeah,
glad. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thanks so much for joining me.
totally my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Unleashed at Work and Home. I invite you to come learn more at colleenpilar.com, where you can be steady, be strong, and belong.